Okay, welcome to the latest webinar sponsored by the Workflow 4.0 e-newsletter and ClearEdge 3D. Our webinar topic today is 25 tips, tactics, and workarounds for better as-built BIMs. My name is Kevin Corbally, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm the editor-in-chief of Workflow 4.0, the newsletter of 3D scanning, modeling, documentation, ideas, and opinions. And first, let me start by thanking you, our attendees, for joining us today. As we all know, as-built documentation is often the most important and difficult part of any BIM project, and often Revit just doesn't have the capabilities for as-built modeling. So today you'll learn from the experts how best to tackle your next BIM project. And let's take a quick look at today's agenda. We have 4 professionals from the scanning and modeling industry who will be relating their best practices for as-built BIMs. And we've divided the tips into groups with our panel taking turns offering their insights. First, we'll look at bidding and project planning, and then we'll learn about on-site data collection. And next, we'll focus on the actual processing and modeling. And then our experts will offer a few overview comments. And as always, we'll wrap up by letting you in the audience send in your questions to our panel of experts. And a couple of quick housekeeping details here. Everyone in the audience will be muted during the session except for our presenters. But we do want you to ask questions, and you can send your questions at any time via the question box. It's not the chat box, the question box, and that should be in the lower right corner of your screen. And our plan is to take the questions, as many as we can, at the conclusion in about the last 10 to 15 minutes of the session today. And the webinar is being recorded, and you'll each receive a link afterwards for how you might want to watch it again or possibly forward it to one of your colleagues. And also a reminder, we've got the web address down there for Workflow 4.0. Go ahead and subscribe to it, sign up for it. That's the e-newsletter for learning as well as sharing experiences, opinions, and best practices. And let's take a quick look at our lineup of speakers for today. These are our panelists. Matt Bird is Director of 3D Services for DeWalt Corporation. And as you see, he's got 8 years of survey experience, quite a bit of laser scanning background as well. One of his specialties is oil and gas. And we've also got Greg Hale with us. He's the CTO and likes to call himself the Chief Disruptor at Hale TIP. And he founded that company earlier this year. As you can see, he's got a long history in construction management, engineering, and architecture. And then Mark Hanna, familiar to many of you. He's President and CEO of Precision Point Incorporated in Indiana. And he's had Precision Point for 5 years now. And he's got a background in surveying, scanning, as well as an engineering background. And then I'd also like to introduce Alex Dimogenes as the new ClearEdge 3D Director of North American Sales. And many of you probably already know Alex. He worked for Faro for about 6 years before joining ClearEdge just recently. So gentlemen, happy to have you all with us today. And let's take a quick look. We always like to set the context for our webinars, and one of the things we say around here is that context is king. And as I said right at the outset, as-built documentation is important, but it's also challenging in a BIM project. And we find that the end users, the clients, they're more often demanding a Revit deliverable, but Revit struggles with as-built modeling. So we're going to talk about understanding the typical as-built project challenges and then proactively planning for them, which can really be the difference in success for a project. And so this webinar really is all about arming you, the attendee, with the tips, best practices, lessons, and ideas, practical stuff that you can apply right away in your next BIM project. So first, we're going to look at bidding and project planning tips. And I'm going to go ahead and bring on Matt Bird. Matt, give us tip number 1.
Alrighty, good morning. Thanks for joining us. So, looking at bidding and project management tips. And one thing I want to say real quick as we get started is you may see some similar tips throughout this presentation from the four of us. And one good thing about that is it's showing you that it's something that's important to all of us, and we've found to help us with our success on certain projects. So tip number one from me on bidding and project management would be to visit your site. If possible, get access, and it's going to help you better understand what it is you're getting into. And the larger the project, the more critical that step is. You know, and as you're doing your site walk, make sure to take photos and really note anything that might be unique to that site that you either haven't seen before. That way when you get back into the office, you can go through exactly how you're going to tackle those challenges or specific sites. As you can see on the bottom right there, I've just got a couple images based on a real project we've done, and I know most people have done a project without visiting it, so I'm sure a lot of you can relate. Based off a phone conversation on a site, we were told, you know, we were probably getting into 3 large rooms that was, you know, 150,000 square feet of building, and then when we actually get to the site, it actually ends up being 16 rooms, you know, and almost twice the size. So site walks are very important, especially on large projects. Then we're going to move on to the next slide here. The second recommendation during bidding and the beginning stage, and really throughout the life cycle of the project, is your communication with your client. Being very specific, especially in this 3D technology, being that it's new, a lot of people don't completely understand its capabilities or really how everything works. So we've found and seen a lot of struggles from other companies and other people that the lack in communication can cause a lot of problems. So being very specific on what exact items does your client need, what level of detail, because those will allow you to customize your workflow depending on what it is that you actually need to pick up on site. And that can also change, you know, you may go from a 1-week project to a 5-week project depending on how much detail is needed. You know, do you need to get up in ceiling tiles? Are you looking to model 1/2-inch electrical lines? You know, knowing those things are very critical during your planning. And now we're moving on to Mark.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, as Matt indicated, and I'm going to expand on his comments a little bit further with respect to communicating. And you know, typically what we're finding, and those here are likely witnessing this as well, is that there's still a fair amount of educating that needs to go into these bidding a project. And for instance, most inquiries we get, there isn't always a scope of work defined. So it's really up to you to help hold that client's hand, help them define that project, scope of work, and the deliverable specifications. And you'd be shocked sometimes calls come in and they just want their building scanned. Well, that's great, but what do you want in that building scan? As Matt indicated as well, interior, exterior, roof. Do you need to get into ceiling plumbing tiles? Also, with the importance of using the scan imagery as a complement to the deliverable, highlight to your client, do you want color imagery or just grayscale, and maybe the pros and cons as to why that might or may or may not be an important investment for the client. And then furthermore, try to understand the bigger picture for your client. Is it important to get the point cloud on a known coordinate system, whether that be state plane grid, is there building grid, site plan coordinates? This way, knowing that from the get-go, understanding the overall project goals is going to enable that client to work with this data more effectively through the project lifestyle. And again, lastly, as Matt indicated, if you're tasked with converting the point cloud to a BIM deliverable, spend a lot of time in this aspect
to ensure success with your deliverable. Utilize, there's some great resources out there. The BIM Forum, USIBD have fantastic documentation defining the level of development. Use those documents to help communicate to your client what the deliverable is going to look like. Furthermore, tip 4, drilling down again on the deliverable considerations. As everybody knows, scan data can be large and unruly. You're dealing with large file sizes, and there's several different ways to deliver the data to your client in various different formats. So be aware of this as you're going through your bidding process and planning. Again, this is another critical component to communicate and educate to your client. For instance, every scanner manufacturer, the data originates in a specific file format. It's likely your client's going to need something more universal. There's a couple here, universal file formats. Again, I mentioned remote viewer capability. This is becoming a really popular complement to a point cloud, giving your client access to the imagery remotely, whether that's cloud-based or server-based in your office. So ensure that they're trained properly on it, and it's included as part of the deliverable. And furthermore, make sure that you have a robust system set up so that they can access that data anytime and utilize that. It's just going to help add a lot more value to your project overall. Next, if you've done a scan job, you know the data sets are big, they're large. There's some great cloud-based solutions out there, but sometimes they're not ideal. You need a very robust and high-speed data lines to get the data up and down quick. Sometimes it's easier just to put it on a hard drive and ship it. And then lastly, very important, is you're responsible for your customers' sensitive data. You're scanning their sites. There's a lot of competitive considerations for them. They're going to be extremely sensitive to this, so ensure then that you've got a robust internal process that you're going to treat your data with a high sense of security while it's in your possession. Tip 5, have a plan. This might be obvious, but I know sometimes we get when we're bidding a job, it can be overwhelming. If we have the benefit of seeing the site and visiting it, it helps. Sometimes, as Matt indicated, we don't always have those luxuries. So we do our best to kind of pre-plan how we're going to scan it. Knowing the information we have, we'll develop a location map. Then we'll take that will then drive a proposed scanning schedule. Again, now we're working very, very closely with the client as we're creating our bid, determining what areas of the building we can get into and get out of at specific times, working hours. What about neighboring buildings? Do we have access to those to get line of sight? So those are a lot of things that you're going to be faced with trying to understand, because once you bid that job, you'll need these considerations to put into place so that you can successfully get through that project. And without having a plan is going to really impede you. Consider your staffing requirements. Are you dealing with this with one scan crew, 2, 3, 4? How are you going to do that? Getting it staffed properly. And furthermore, collecting the data is only one aspect of it. You're going to have a lot of data to register and clean up. That takes a lot of resources, so make sure you have all those resources and capabilities at your disposal to support you. And then lastly, equipment considerations. Whether you own it, you're going to rent it, make sure your equipment you're going to have those resources in place with all the accessories, targeting spheres. So those are all really important items to consider.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. And we're going to move into the next segment now. We're going to talk about 8 on-site data collection tips. And actually, Mark, that's going to go back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so as you get on the site, and again, this is something that's kind of a segue from still the planning right into the when you're doing the project. Your project conditions are real important. You've now been hired. You're tasked with with collecting some really good data, reality capture data, and you need to know the environment you're going into. Scanners don't work in every environment. They don't excel in every environment. So you're going to be faced with lots of different situations, and this could be a job killer for you. For instance, reflectivity, vibration, airborne debris, all those items could impact the quality of your data, the accuracy of your data. So have contingencies in place, ask these questions, and then when you go to get on the job, ensure that you're working in these working on these client sites at times where you're not dealing with these environmental considerations. Matt mentioned it earlier, line of sight obstructions. We're asked to do a lot of scanning up in ceiling tiles. Well, an obvious question is, who's removing those tiles? Is that going to be, is the service provider tasked with doing that, or is the client going to have an appropriate person in place to do that? That's real important. Those line of sight obstructions need to be considered and dealt with before you get on site. Another point too is no site you're scanning is perfect and static. There's lots of things going on typically, whether it's pedestrians, vehicles, plant operations. So to provide a good data set, you'll want to, well, you're not going to ask your facility to shut down. It's really going to defeat the purpose of scanning, but you can clean the data up. And this is recommended to provide a really nice deliverable for your client. And then lastly, know those working hours when your crews can be in there doing the work, and coordinate that carefully with your customer. And access considerations is of paramount importance. Your crew's stuck behind a locked door, that's going to kill your profitability. It's happened, and it will continue to happen. So try to get all those barriers out of the way. Tip number 7. There are some amazing targetless registration technologies that are really advancing. We're super excited about those. It seems that the field process seems to be getting easier and easier, and that's great. However, you still need to check your data. You're on the hook for providing your client with an accurate data set. They're designing and building around your point cloud. You really need to ensure that you're giving them a data set that is accurate within the specified tolerance of your project. So having a check in place using survey control is of paramount importance. Pre-plan your locations where you're going to use external survey references in combination with your overlapping scans and targeting, whether you're going targetless or using targets. Utilize target stickers so you can reestablish targets if you need to. You haven't lost those, and then use those for horizontal and vertical control. Also, make sure your scanning equipment is in calibration. Calibrated by the manufacturer, but also do periodic checks. Make sure it's a measuring technology. Make sure it's measuring within the specifications, and that's really important. And then lastly, provide your client with a registration report so that they can determine the errors and the project's met the overall specification. When you get into large projects, break it down into smaller manageable pieces. Don't be so overwhelmed. When you're doing a stadium, an airport, it can be real overwhelming. Try to break it down into smaller manageable pieces, which will be useful in organizing the post-processing and registration. Carefully plan all this out. Scan in smaller sections, and then utilize survey control to tie those clusters all together. It's going to really simplify field operations, and it's going to really organize the post-processing and registration in the office. Really help keep things manageable, and using this in combination with survey control is going to really help ensure that you're continuing to keep things registered and accurate as you're bringing the project together into one complete point cloud. I'm going to pass it on to Alex.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yeah, so tip number 9 is scanner placement is key for proper feature coverage. So when I'm referring to coverage here, I'm referring to the amount of data that you're actually collecting on the features and the as-built environment. What you want to do is place the scanner in locations to capture a complete measurement of the environment or object. For example, ask yourself if you will need the thickness measurement of an I-beam in this case. You want to scan from both sides. It seems fairly obvious, but there's a lot of times where you scan and miss a side or miss some object just because you want to get through the project quicker. So spend a little bit of extra time, take an extra scan from another location. This will give you complete information for that, especially if you're using feature extraction software. The other thing is that it'll save time processing the data in the future. So downstream, it'll increase the accuracy and confidence in later steps, particularly if you are trying to create a model from the point cloud data. Tip number 10, choose appropriate scanner settings. So for this, I tend to interchange density and coverage, but coverage, I mean the area of the scan, so the actual environment, the different positions. Density refers more towards the number of points in a given area of an object. So the example here is that higher resolution scan settings might be required for smaller objects that are farther away. For example, conduits, small bore piping. Up high in a ceiling, you may need to use higher resolution settings versus something like this, which is a small mechanical room. You can get away with lower resolution settings and still achieve the same density on those features. So in this case, because you're closer to the objects, you can use lower resolution settings on your scanner versus the previous image where a lot of that piping in the food processing plant was up high, very small bore. So you're going to want to just kind of check those settings and make sure you're getting enough density on those objects so that you can take accurate measurements and create modeled features afterwards. Okay, Mark touched on this as well, but tip number 11 is registration. So go into your project understanding what type of registration process you are going to use. Are you going to use target list registration, targets, survey control? Again, you want to choose the proper control for your project. So in this example, you may need to tie into plant coordinates, or you may have a large hospital project where you need survey control to ensure your accuracy. Again, going back to that previous slide, if you looked at that small mechanical room, you could probably use some of the newer target list registration features that are available, such as Recap or Ferrocene or even Cyclone, which has had it for a long time, to get away with a good registered data set. But when you're looking at larger projects, you want to make sure that you've got the right targets and the right survey control that is in place to ensure your accuracy. And now it's over to Matt again.
All right. And like I mentioned before, I think we've got some overlap here still. But like I also said, I think that just shows the importance of some of these topics. So again, make sure your scanner settings are going to be customized to the project you're doing. For instance, the image on the right, you can see how sparse that point cloud is, but then underneath you can see that it's plenty dense enough to get the ground data. Now, if we use those same scanner settings inside of a building and we wanted to pick up 2-inch lines, well, if we zoom into that point cloud, we're not going to know whether we're looking at a wall, a pipe, nothing. It's just going to be really sparse and you won't be able to accurately model. Again, just making sure you understand that. The density is important depending on what you're going to do with the data. How small are the items you're picking up? Another big thing is the feature extraction software. Depending on the density of your point cloud is going to change how software reacts when you're trying to use any either automatic feature extraction or semi-automatic. The software is looking for a certain amount of points or density around certain objects, so sometimes that can affect, even with cloud-to-cloud registration, it can affect it. So just trying to get a better understanding of that and make sure you know what you should have for a certain project. And some along the same line of what Alex was mentioning with picking up scans on certain sides of features, a recommendation I have and something I've kind of put in place is making sure that we get more than enough data instead of not enough. We can always take that point cloud and we can either delete scans if we don't need them. We could decimate the entire point cloud set so that it's not as dense, and we can just clip out areas that's not needed. If there's a portion of a building, or if there's certain things we don't need, there's ways to cut the data back down once you have it. But if you go to the site the first time and don't get enough, the next step for you is making another site visit, telling your client you didn't get it all the first time. So for us, we found it's very important to get a lot of data the first time, make sure it's good, make sure it's clean, do extra setups, and then from there on, you can handle it in the office. And you don't have to go back to your client, like I said, and tell them that you didn't get enough, because that's never something a client wants to hear. So just think about that per project.
Okay, great, Matt. And now we're going to move into talking about the actual processing and modeling of the data itself. And Matt, that's back to you.
Yeah, I threw one in here during the data processing. So target list registration, I know we've also talked about it a little already, but my first comment for it is don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to try new technology. Get into the software that's utilizing it and trial it and test it. Whether it's a project you've done in the past and you want to take those same scans in and try the target list, or you want to do it on your next project, it's worth trying, because if you set it up in a proper workflow, you can use a mix of cloud to cloud and survey control, or cloud and cloud and a few targets, but you do have to understand the limitations. So going through that trialing process is important. But just don't be afraid to try it, because it's very useful. For example, the image on the right with this bridge, very clean data set. We didn't use any targets or any survey control on that. It didn't need to go on a coordinate system. And we've trialed cloud to cloud enough that we're very comfortable with it at times. But that's also where knowing the limitations is important, and going through that trial process before relying on it. And back over to Mark.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, this might not be obvious, but when you get your data set all registered together, there's still a fair amount of work to go with getting that data really usable, and that would be ensuring that you're filtering and cleaning up the scan data. What I'm illustrating here is reducing noise and artifacts or stray points in the scan data. The scanner's picking up a lot of good data, but there's also a lot of data that isn't needed, whether it's in a far distance. So you want to go ahead and remove all that, depending on what registration software you're using. And then what that's going to do for you is, if you're using if you're modeling around, it's going to increase your modeling accuracy. It's going to get the file sizes much smaller, much easier to manage on that downflow modeling process. And then if you are using feature extraction technologies, it's going to significantly improve your results, because it's extracting on good data that's normalized and it's cleaned up.
All right. Thanks, Mark. This is Greg. Just moving on in tip number 16, removing unnecessary scan data for CAD reference, but, with a big but, maintain those full scans for client visualization. I would say a big part of the workflow is for clients to see those panoramic images, and depending upon how much data you delete out of that, it can go ahead and mess things up. So I've got another example up here of a plan or aerial view of a scan, and going ahead and deleting out some scope of work that wasn't necessary for the project. It's good to delete that out to have some better performance CAD files or feature extraction, but at the same time, once you do that, you're going to end up with an image in your panoramic images within the software that cuts that data out, and I say that they look like a bunch of black holes. So here's that same image after that scan data has been deleted out,
And the first question you get was someone's pans around that image and says, well, what is all that black stuff? That's not what my building looks like. You want to avoid those questions and just provide that best performing experience. So maintain both the original data as it's registered, and then once you get beyond that, move to a CAD workflow and delete out scan data that you don't need. So tip number 17, coordinating CAD file origins and orientation before finalizing registration. So we've hit on this topic before about having a good plan in place. Some of this plan is understanding what your clients are going to do with that data once they receive it. So setting up your coordinate system, whether it's a state plane coordinate system or whether it's just a CAD coordinate system, makes a world of difference. You can build that into your registration so that as you send the file to them and they bring it into their CAD programs, whether it's AutoCAD, MicroStation, Revit, whatever that might be, you want that file to drop directly into place where people expect it to fall. So my next image shows that just dropping directly into place. That's a great experience for the client. You send them the files, they hit link file within their CAD program, and it just falls right into place. They love seeing that, especially contractors when they're dealing with multiple subs and they're all dealing with that same data. They don't want to have to do any kind of transformation or localization of coordinates, anything to that effect. They just want it to work. So make it as easy as possible on them as you can. Tip number 18, files can be repositioned, and within parentheses here's with caution within Revit. I know in previous presentations that I've watched and I've presented in before, the general rule is to never move the scan data within Revit. However, there are going to be times on projects where, let's say, the project is already modeled and you're actually coming in and doing a 3D laser scan to verify things that have already been modeled. So the coordinate system is all kind of already set up in a CAD environment, and you actually have to move the scan data to match or to give a best fit. So you can go ahead and move those. Keep in mind, if you go ahead and rotate project north, or if you move those items, you can either link additional scans in by shared coordinates, or again, if you have moved those scans to particular locations based upon how a Revit model was set up previously, you can use a positioning system where it uses origin to last placed. So it will follow the coordinate system of that scan based upon your last movement. So that can be extremely helpful. I do recommend in your planning process that you plan on not moving it, because it makes all of the other feature extraction just that much better and easier, and you don't have to go around moving things. But in the cases that you do, it's not unheard of for you to go ahead and move that scan data inside of a Revit model. So tip number 19, it often gets overlooked, but starting with a good template. I've worked for a lot of design offices, and everybody has a different workflow and a different kind of a template, and they all have different content within that template. Nothing is better in the client experience than handing off a model, and it looks exactly the way that they're used to seeing it, just like the rest of their design team has been set up. So if you can acquire a client's Revit template, you can start with that. You can build some of your own additional standards into that, but it can be extremely useful. So things like duct sizes and duct system types and pipe systems and pipe system types, all that stuff is built in, and additionally it can help the feature extraction software with those system types as you're translating from that extraction software over to a Revit or an AutoCAD environment to have those standards in place. So we're looking for that smooth handoff between us and the client. On the lighter side here, or on the darker side as you might put it, don't be afraid to show your dark side. And I don't mean the back side, I mean the dark side. Everybody who's used to working in Revit has a default white background. You can go ahead and change that to a black background, and you can see the difference here. We've got a white background with lots of light data. If you go ahead and switch that screen background to a black background, as you're used to seeing in AutoCAD, you can see those white or light points that much better. So especially if you're doing laser scanning without color images, as far as just the scan data, you're going to actually probably have a better look, a better feel. You're going to save some strain on your eyes by just using that black background. I actually commonly flip back and forth between these two modeling backgrounds. And coming up here, you should also be able to change that background some other colors other than black, so like a dark blue or a dark gray. So it can really help out. Another little Revit trick here, placing the recap files on their own work sets. Those who have worked on large design teams know this kind of a workflow where you're breaking up large Revit models into multiple work sets. And there's two main keys to using those work sets. They're really for file management. And we all know with point clouds, you're dealing with lots of very large data. So one data set, one recap file might be 5 gigs, 6 gigs, 10 gigs of data. And if you hand off a model to a client and you have everything loaded, all of those links loaded, and they open that file, you might be loading in 20, 30, 50, 100 gigs at one time. So what this does is helps you manage that. If you place each individual recap file on its own work set, you can allow that user to load and unload those work sets and therefore their files as needed, including as they open the file. So that can be a real time saver and a real performance, especially for those with limited computer performance or limited RAM on their computers. So big tip there, really helpful in the workflow. Now, as you set those things up, this kind of comes along with the client's template and your own internal template. But use view templates as part of this for creating those floor plans, elevation sections, and 3D views. This is really more of a Revit tip than a scanning tip. But what it's going to help you do is it's going to help you convey that data to the client so that they only have specific views that are set up with those point clouds showing. So we're looking at a lot of Revit or a lot of scan data, and again, loading in 5 gigs or 10 gigs at a time. They can see either individual floors or multiple floors, all based upon those work sets, and then setting up those color overrides for those specific views really helps convey a message to the client of their scan data. Tip number 23, creating camera views from 3D positions. Now this is getting pretty popular in most feature extraction software where you can go ahead and model from the position of the scanner. You're going to have the best view of that scan data from that position. You'll get the best looking density, so therefore it'll be that much easier to model as opposed to looking at it in a 3D environment. This is another image of that of a scan data overlaid in Revit. You can see the scan data and you can see the Revit model. It just helps give a better picture of what you're modeling. So go ahead and set that up. There are some specific softwares that will do that for you. They're nice little add-ins. Tip number 24. Don't be afraid to go ahead and look at this in another piece of software as well. Navisworks is a great aggregator of different data types. So being able to load the virtual model in along with the scan data and providing color overrides. It also is a great performer as far as walking a model. So you have basically both data sets, both the virtual model and the scan data, and you're able to walk through that. It's probably the best way that I know of to find missing data or find where you might have made a mistake in your modeling workflow. You just get views from all positions, and it's the same thing I talk about for an overall virtual modeling environment, is walk the model, find out where you might have missed something. It's a great tool. And back to Matt.
All right, just a few tips on data processing and modeling again. So this is specifically in the modeling workflow. New software that's coming out and has been around for a short time is just continuing to drastically improve with feature extraction, and it helps save a lot of time in the modeling process. One of these specifically that we use is the Edgewise software. And again, like I said at the top here, don't be afraid to try a new technology. It goes right along with the cloud-to-cloud. This stuff may be new and it's kind of scary to use sometimes, but if you can get it into a proper workflow, it's going to help you be more efficient. It can save a lot of man-hours. On the right there in the images, you can see the top right is a point cloud of an oil and gas facility that we were going to be modeling, and that bottom right picture is what was automatically extracted with 0 man-hours using the Edgewise plant software. So it isn't perfect, just like anything else. You know, it is technology. It isn't perfect. It doesn't extract everything the first time, and it actually sometimes extracts things that aren't pipes either. but it's a huge head start. So we get that first extraction, and then there's other tools inside the software to go through and clean up efficiently and do quality checks on the point cloud. So again, same with cloud to cloud. At the bottom, my note there is knowing the limitations. And I think that's overall for all this technology we're looking at, is knowing what it can do, what its capabilities are, when to apply which type of technology, whether it's the hardware or software side, and definitely knowing the limitations of all of them. Because if you get it in the right workflow and you use a combination of the different hardware and software settings and whatnot, it can really be built into a great workflow having the right mixture.
Okay, great. Matt, thanks for that. And we know we promised you 25 tips, and actually we've got a couple more bonus tips. But before we go on to those, let me just remind everybody in attendance today, we will be taking questions in just a few minutes. So you can start typing those in now to your question box and sending them over to us, and we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes of Q&A. But before we do that, we do have some bonus tips. Matt, go ahead.
Sure, and I see that one typo there. I've got customer services, but customer service and communication, and kind of along the same lines of what I was just saying, knowing the limitations, knowing what technology to use. People like to work with people. Be responsive on your timeline. If you're ever delayed in a project, make sure you keep your client updated and talk with them, treating them the way that you want to be treated. We've seen a lot of companies that are just in it for the work, and they don't take that extra step to really have that person-on-person communication. And so my recommendation there is, don't just do it to win jobs, but really work on building relationships, and in turn that's going to build trust with people. And your client isn't going to just give you one job, but you're going to have that relationship, and they're going to trust you. They're going to know how you work. They're going to know your deliverables. If they see that you have things in place to do quality checks, and they know that you understand the workflow you have with these different technologies, and you understand them, you've trialed them, you know those limitations, it's really just going to help you and help your clients understand you better and build that trust. And back to Alex.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, kind of going on with Matt's theme of putting fear of new technology aside. Try different data capture devices. So, you don't need to be stuck with a single brand or a single type of scanner these days. There's handheld devices out there that help get tighter areas, small mechanical rooms, up into ceilings, things that are very, obscured and difficult to, excuse me, to capture. These are great devices that are coming on the market and starting to be used more and more. The next thing is, exploring new software, whether it's Recap or Edgewise or anything else new that comes out on the market. Try it out. Talk to people that have used it. Get some feedback. Get a trial license. There's some new features out in Edgewise, for example, for the ducting. That's a great new tool that's available and being tried out. The other thing is seek out people with experience. If you can, even try to get somebody that's been scanning for a number of years to do a project with you. Come on site. Call them up and ask them questions. Most of the people that I know that have been in this industry are very interested in spreading their knowledge and helping other people achieve, because it only excels, advances the industry in general. And then also share your successes. It's great to hear good case studies and things that people are doing well, but it's also good to know, what's not working. What are things where you're having difficulties, because that's a way for companies to, whether it's hardware or software, decide, hey, these are things that we can fix. These are things that we need to put our attention on to make it better for the clients and the customers that are using the data and using these services. So, I think experiment and use people with experience, and I think that's a great tip for moving forward in the scanning industry.
All right, terrific, Alex. Thanks. And now, as always, we've come to the Q&A part of our webinar, which we often call Ask the Experts. So what I'm going to do is ask all of our panelists to turn their mics back on, and I'll ask the attendees to go ahead and send more questions in. We already have several coming in here. Let's see. Looks like the first one is going to be for Mark Hanna. It says, Mark, what tools do you use to automatically clean point clouds?
We're actually, our current workflow is we're currently using a combination of Faro Scene, and then we're further cleaning and organizing the data, regioning it out using Recap. And that seems to be the most robust workflow that we've found.
Okay, great. And actually, the next question is about Recap, Mark, so you might want to take a first shot at this. Somebody asked, what are some of the limitations you're seeing with Recap?
You know, there's one right now, and I know they're improving this, but we've noticed that when you're regioning and placing segments of the point cloud on layers, it's degrading the performance of the point cloud and kind of slowing it down. So that's kind of been impeding a little bit of our efforts. I know they're aware of it and they're working on it, but that's kind of one of the things that we're finding. I mean, other than that, with our workflow, we found it quite a useful tool.
Okay, great. And this next question is kind of interesting. I'll throw this over to Matt, at least initially. What software are you using for planning and estimating scan jobs?
Well, to be honest, I wouldn't say we have a specific software that we currently use for planning and estimating, other than some of the basics of, you know, Microsoft and building maybe some templates in something like Excel, where after doing a job walk, you know, specifically on a job walk, we'll take something like a printout, a floor plan if we can get our hands on it, or a Google Earth screenshot if we can get that with a highlighted scope area. We'll take that on site with us to make notes on. Then when we come back into the office, we'll use certain Excel spreadsheets that we've set up to go through and put estimated scan times, estimated setups, and based on that we can kind of, from previous experience, we can kind of guesstimate, okay, we've got this many scans, usually registration and processing will take this long for that many scans. So I wouldn't say there's a specific software. It's more knowing your workflow, knowing during planning maybe how many scans you think a project will take, then from there knowing how long the rest of your workflow has taken.
Right, okay. Yeah, and Greg, how about you? Anything to add on that one?
Yeah, I actually use Bluebeam Review. It's got some nice, it's just basically a PDF markup tool, but it also has a database built into it. So based upon something like a walkthrough, or if someone gives me some initial floor plans, I can go ahead and set up a sequence, you know, basically plotting points of expected scan locations. It'll count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each one is associated with a time and a cost, and then that basically just adds itself up. So it's a little bit of a work to set it up, but it's not anything worse than doing a typical kind of a CAD file with a few properties. And I find it to be really good. And I can throw that Bluebeam Review on an iPad and take it out in the field and do a walkthrough and set up the scan locations at the same time.
Yeah, say that name again, Greg.
It's a Bluebeam Review.
Gotcha. Okay, great. All right, terrific. And Mark, did you want to jump in on how you handle that one?
You know, I don't have anything more to add except with, you know, I'll emphasize Greg's point. Bluebeam's great for doing this, because your task is to communicate your scope of work, and both Greg and Matt suggested very similar things we're doing, and really appropriate tools to enable that.
Okay, great. All right, and Greg, why don't you take this one? What's the typical range of accuracy that clients are requiring these days, and are the current static scanning systems overkill for some applications?
Wow. Yeah, it's a little bit of a wide open question. We get all sorts of different kind of expectations, just because there's so many different applications for scanning. I tend to do a lot of architectural and engineering applications, so architects and engineers and some contractors, and they all kind of expect different things. They're all very happy with the the 2 millimeter general accuracy that you talk about for the scan data, and then we tend to dial that back for specific modeling applications. So it might be 2 millimeters, in metric terms. We might kind of round that out to like an 1/8 inch in English terms, and then as we get down to the modeling accuracy, it's down to like a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. And pretty much everybody has been very happy with that. There are some specific engineering applications where they're doing things like structural analysis with it, where they want things to be a little bit tighter. But otherwise, that tends to be about it. Anything in underneath a 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch, people are very happy with that kind of accuracy. Excuse me, especially over large buildings.
Okay. Mark or Matt, do you have anything to add on that?
Not specifically. I think that was a good cover.
Okay. All right. Great. Here's a really interesting question, and I'm going to ask Matt, Greg, and Mark to weigh in on this. Someone says, I'm representing the client. Do you have any tips from the client side? In other words, anything maybe the client needs to make sure to ask of the contractor?
Oh, goodness, that's a good one. Kind of going through this whole presentation, how we've talked about, specifically some of the things I really like to stress to people, because we've seen a lot of issues from certain clients, having that issue where they don't know exactly what to ask and they don't know what to expect yet. So really it's whatever service provider you have on hand, you're hoping that they understand everything and know their workflows and know what they're doing, but sometimes they don't, and a lot of times for new clients that haven't used this technology don't know what to expect. So maybe trying to build a list. I've seen a couple clients build a spreadsheet that they send out to service providers and have them create a checklist or something showing what type of files you're going to get, accuracy, different things like that, so they can kind of prove themselves and know that they know the limitations of the software they're using and the hardware. And so it's something that you might want to sit down with somebody that has experience doing scanning or modeling and help create that checklist that you can use each time you're going to use a service provider.
Okay, great. Greg, how about you?
I think this is a kind of a general, I hate to kind of avoid the question and answer with some more questions, but it's really, comes down to laying out the expectations. A good service provider will kind of ask more questions than they answer with respect to, what are you trying to do with that data? Are you just trying to use it for design, for construction? Do you want to use it for life cycle management? And if they aren't asking you more questions about what else you might potentially want to use it for, then they're just basically just trying to fill your immediate need, your immediate expectation. So I guess expect or hope that your provider starts asking you a lot of questions about what else you might want to use that data for.
Gotcha. Okay. And Mark, any final comments on that question?
Yeah, I would add, and those are all fantastic points. I would just add that there are available resources out there. There's a collaborative of service providers and owners and those interested in 3D documentation, and they formed a group called the U.S. Institute of Building Documentation, USIBD, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't point you to that direction, usibd.org. We've all collectively put a lot of effort in developing specifications to help guide clients of these services so that they do have a predictable outcome, and then they get transparency in pricing and an overall good experience from using scanning services and modeling, which really collectively helps the entire industry.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, great. Still have a few questions to go here. Alex, you haven't had any questions yet. Let me. There are two about software. I'm going to ask both of these to you and go ahead and answer them. One is, what software do you recommend for auto extraction of CAD data and line work? And then the other one is, what software would you recommend for wall extraction from point clouds?
Yeah, those are good questions, and quite honestly, I mean, my background was Faro. I would get those kind of questions a lot when I was doing a demo. You know, we want to take the point cloud and create a model. A lot of times I would point them over to ClearEdge and using the Edgewise software, and I know that answer may sound a little bit self-serving now that I work with ClearEdge, but it really does a fantastic job. And for automatically extracting features, it's probably the premier software out there. You know, like Matt and the other guys were saying earlier, nothing's perfect, but it has come a long way, and it really speeds up the process for extracting features.
Okay. All right. And the next question is, somebody asked what survey control is, and Mark, I think it was you who was talking about that.
Yeah. So I think it's important to understand and highlight that when you get into very large scanning projects, large buildings, large sites, you really need, it really becomes more as much as a land surveying project as it does a laser scanning project. So it's really essential that when you're doing projects that, you know, you're getting up near 1,000, 2,000 scan positions, you really need to utilize survey total stations to constrain your data using survey principles to verify that your targets are accurately controlled, and then the point cloud is being verified against known control through typical survey workflows. So that's what I mean by utilizing survey control.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. And here's a really interesting question. Probably everybody on the panel can offer something on this. Alex, I'll start with you. What should be included in drafting a scanning proposal for a client?
Oh, that's a good question. I think you know, first of all is understanding you know, some of the things that the other guys have said as well is understanding, you know, what the client is going to receive as an end product. One of the things that I was going to answer an earlier question was, especially when you're dealing with the client, is making sure that they understand the vocabulary. So kind of lay out some of the differences between what's a point cloud and what's a model. A lot of times I hear point cloud model, and that becomes very fuzzy. You know, point cloud is the points. A model is modeled features from the point cloud. So that's really important, is understanding, you know, first of all, what the client is going to get, and going through that with the client and showing them examples of what that is actually going to look like.
Okay. Anybody else like to add to that?
Yeah, this is Greg. I think Mark pointed to the USIBD. You know, they do have a great specification specifically for proposals, where they've kind of laid out some expectations and then allow you to drill down to a lot of specifics, or kind of stay high level to some general accuracies. Another is to kind of look at you know, some of the BIM requirements that have been out there for different entities, whether they be universities or you know, federal agencies, or whoever that might be. There's a lot of similarities in the industry as far as, you know, laying out some of the expectations on the information that you're going to derive from the scan data. So USIBD is a great resource for that, and it will help you list out, you know, some of those things that you should expect.
Okay, great. And Matt or Mark, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, just as far as what, you know, I know the original question, what to include in your proposal, like these guys are saying, there's some resources out there that have some recommendations. I mean, on a basic level, just laying out, you know, as far as obviously how long your scan project's estimated to take, you know, including the time back in the office and processing, you know, costs associated with that, of course, and then some of the things which I think, like we've all also covered, is in the beginning stages of planning your project. I think a lot of the discussion is going to happen there, letting the client know what you can provide. That way they have the option of, do we want something like web share where we have the panoramic viewing? Do we want a model, and how detailed is it? So really your proposal is going to be a summarization of everything you already talked about during the planning stage with your client.
Okay, great. Mark, any last words on that one?
Yeah, I'll just wrap this topic up with don't be afraid. I know a lot of people. Scanning is getting a lot of attention through lots of different. It's everywhere now, and don't be afraid of it. Interview 3 of us. Call 3 service providers. Ask us to submit a request for qualification. Share with you what we've done. Everyone's doing amazing work. There's fantastic service providers out there. We're all, some of us are good in some areas than others. Some of us are good in all areas. So interview, pick up the phone, call us, and I really think, get comfortable with it, and then use all those resources we've already talked about today, and then I think your success is going to be much more predictable if you put forth the effort in getting all that stuff in order.
Great. Thanks, Mark. Looks like that's going to be the last word. We're out of time for today. So on behalf of our panelists and our sponsors, Workflow 4.0 and ClearEdge 3D, let me thank you, all of our attendees, for joining us today. And just a reminder, you'll be receiving an email after the broadcast with a link to the recording and a chance to subscribe to the newsletter and some other follow-up information. And we hope to see you again in 2015 for our next webinar. Thanks for joining us.